Well, good morning again. I want to welcome you if you came in late. My name is Brett. I'm the lead pastor here at New Life. And this morning you joined us in a series called Aliens. And we are talking about aliens. And I'd like to ask the question, or I'd like to know the answer for any of you. Have you ever seen one? Have you ever seen an alien? Have you ever been a part of an experience where there's been an alien or you've seen a UFO or something? Well, as we stand here today, guess what? The sightings are on an increase. Did you know that? Do you pay attention to this? There's a whole culture, there's a whole alien culture in this world that I was not aware of. And yet you may know of it. In fact, we have a whole area here in the United States that's dedicated towards aliens. In fact, I don't even have to say the number. There's a number associated with this area. Can you tell me what that number is? 42. That's exactly right. 51. Area 51. There are aliens in this world. At least we believe there are, and I say we, by many people believe there are. And there have been sightings, and there continue to be sightings, and people claim that they've seen them. In fact, sightings in many parts of the world are on an increase. Can anybody tell me where the most sightings have increased over the last number of years? What nation they're coming from? Canada. Canada. Something's happening north of here where people are seeing aliens. I think we should go check it out. But you know what? Last year, there was actually an incident that piqued the interest of a number of individuals because something took place here in the United States that was very relevant to the conversation of aliens. When we think of aliens, most of us think of UFOs. We think of unidentified flying objects. Well, in 2015, there was actually a fighter jet along the coast of Florida that caught something on video that can't be explained. In 2017, the government released it, very secretly put it out there, and last year someone got a hold of it and made it quite public, and it went viral. So much so that the government then had to acknowledge whether it was actually something, and they did tell us that they caught something that they have no idea what it is. Here's a report from CNN to kind of give you an idea of what happened. Take a look.
Acknowledge that videos appearing to show UFOs flying through the air are real. They don't call them UFOs, they call them unidentified aerial phenomena. The several videos they're talking about were recorded years ago by fighter pilots. Then in 2017, they were made public by the New York Times. More now from our Randy Kay.
Look at this thing. It's rotating.
Images of that rotating thing captured by U.S. Navy aircraft, sensors locking in on the target. Commander David Fravor saw it firsthand during a training mission, describing it like a 40-foot-long tic-tac, maneuvering rapidly and changing direction.
As we both looked out the right side of our airplane, we saw a disturbance in the water and a white object, oblong, pointing north.
The object was first sighted in 2004, then similar objects again in 2015. Footage of the sightings, declassified by the military, weren't made public until December 2017 by the New York Times and a group that researches UFOs.
There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots to the west. The whole thing, dude.
This was extremely abrupt, like a ping pong ball bouncing off a wall. The ability to hover over the water and then start a vertical climb from basically zero up towards about 12,000 feet and then accelerate in less than 2 seconds and disappear is something I had never seen in my life.
The Navy says it still doesn't know what the objects are, and officials aren't speculating. A Navy spokesman simply confirming to CNN the objects seen in the various clips are unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAPs.
The UFO reports were first investigated by a secret $22 million program, part of the Defense Department budget, that investigated reports of UFOs. The program has since been shut down, but it was run by a military intelligence official who told CNN they found compelling evidence that we, quote, may not be alone. Randy Kay, CNN, New York.
We may not be alone. That's kind of cool. See, we've been fascinated with the idea of aliens for a very long time. And there's now evidence that the government has acknowledged that we have something caught on camera that we can't explain. But for years, we've been wanting to know, is there something else out there? We have pointed satellite dishes out there. We have sent rockets into space. We have sent satellites. We've sent human beings. In fact, scientists have studied the universe. And they believe that after all of this extensive study that we've done, that there are roughly 1 octillion planets in our universe. 1 octillion. That's a 1 followed by 27 zeros. 1 octillion planets. And they've been studying these planets, trying to figure out, is there life out there? Is there something else out there? Are there aliens in this world? And over the years, as we've done all these things, as we've listened, as we've looked, as we've investigated, guess what we've found? Nothing. Nothing. Bubkiss, zip, zilch, nada. There are things that we cannot explain. There are videos, there are eyewitness testimonies of things that we're not sure what they are. But are they aliens? I don't know. I would argue that no, they are not. But I would tell you that there are aliens, and I have found them. And so we're going to look this morning in 1 Peter chapter 2 to see where they come from. Take a look with me. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 11. We're going to be in 11 through 17 this morning. 1 Peter 2, 11 through 17. If you don't have a Bible this morning, I'd love to give you one. There's one on the back table that you can grab. If you don't want a hard copy, you can download one on any smart device. We study it every Sunday when we come in with the hope that we take it with us and study it every day of the week, wherever it is that we go, because it will change your life. It will change your perspective. It will change the way that you view this world, even when it comes to things like aliens. And so I want to start this morning, 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 11. Beloved, I urge you as aliens and strangers in this world to abstain from sinful desires, which wage war against your soul. I'm going to stop right there for the time being. Beloved, I urge you as aliens and strangers in this world to abstain from sinful desires, which wage war against your soul. There you go. I found them. There's the aliens. They're right there. In fact, Peter's writing to them very specifically saying, I urge you as aliens and strangers. So who's he talking to? Well, he's talking to a group of individuals that had just come to know Jesus Christ as their personal Lord and Savior. That they were different now. They were no longer like the world. They were aliens. And so as he's talking to these individuals, he's also talking to you and me. Are there aliens in this world? Yes, there are. And guess where they're at? Right here in this room. You guys are aliens. You're strange, you're weird. Not weird as in odd, weird as in different, right? We've talked about this. We are weird. We're aliens, we're strangers. And Peter's now talking to them as individuals who he's declared their place in this world. Not only are they aliens and strangers, but they're to have an influence in this world as a royal priesthood. To kind of catch us up from last week, we got to this point as Peter's talking to them that they've been purchased, redeemed, bought by the blood of Christ to be different in this world. That their place now is a royal priesthood. Not for the body, because the body no longer needs a priest. The believers no longer need a priest because we have the ultimate high priest, Jesus. But instead, our place in this world is a royal priesthood. We talked about how priesthood, the root there of priest, or the root priest, was translated later into Latin as pontiff or pontifex or pope, which literally was bridge builder. That the role in this world of individuals who now believe in Jesus is as a bridge builder. Because what was the role of the priest? To build a bridge from the people to God. All the way back to the Old Testament, the priest was the conduit from the people to God. Jesus came, he tore the curtain, he opened the way for all of us through him to enter into the holy throne room, to be right there with God. And our responsibility then is to be a priesthood in this world to others, a holy nation, a chosen people, bridges to God, which I use this very tiny illustration, which many of you in the back probably can't even see. And yet it's on my desk as a reminder that I am like this, a bridge. That my role in this world is to help people find their way to God, a royal priesthood. And so what Peter's saying then is as we think about being a royal priesthood, we think about being priests in this world, his view and his perspective in this passage is changing as he's been talking specifically to the church and how they deal with each other. He's now changing his perspective saying, as a royal priesthood then, how should you live in this world with the perspective of everybody else around you? And he starts here in verse 11. With this challenge, as a royal priesthood, as bridge builders, this is one of the first things that you should do in your life. I urge you, as aliens and strangers, as a royal priesthood, as bridge builders, to abstain from sinful desires, which wage war against your soul. Abstain from sinful desires which wage war against your soul. Peter uses very strong language here. We are in a war that is being waged against your soul every day with desires that you have that lead us away from God rather than leading us towards God. And Peter here says, abstain from these sinful desires. And I'd love at this point to be able to say, here's the 10 things that you can do to abstain from these sinful desires. It'd be really great to go through all the different things that we could do, but the passage doesn't do that. Peter doesn't do that. He doesn't go through the ways to abstain. He just says, brothers and sisters, I urge you, I plead with you, I beseech you, abstain from these sinful desires. Because see, I can't go through specific ways for you to abstain from those sinful desires because for each and every one of you, they're different. They're different. And yet each and every one of us is in a war, but the battle we're fighting in that war is different because Peter uses the plural here, sinful desires, which means there are many of them. In fact, I could go to each and every one of us in this room and say, what is the war that's waging against your soul right now? What is the battle that you're fighting? And it may be different for all of us. Use my wife and I as an example. We live in the same house. We are raising the same kids. We go to the same church. We work in the same building. And yet, the battle that each and every one of us are fighting, the battle that the two of us together, through all the similarities, are fighting, is different. And yet it's the same war. It's like World War II. There were multiple parts to World War II. If you were in the Pacific versus being in Europe, you were battling the same war, but you were fighting different battles, right? You were fighting the same war, but there were different battles that you were part of. And those battles were different. Some were on water, some were on land, some were in air, some were hand-to-hand fighting, some were dropping atomic bombs, some were doing all sorts of different things, and yet it was a war. And Peter says there is a war right now in your body, for your soul, happening with these sinful desires. And he says, I urge you, abstain from them. Abstain from them. That as a royal priesthood, as bridge builders, one of the first things we need to do is to make sure that we're abstaining from sinful desires. Once we've then abstained from them, he says, live such good lives among the pagans that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits us. Live such good lives among the pagans that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits us. See, these battles will threaten to take over your life. And if we don't abstain from these battles, we will walk down a path that will lead people away from God, that will lead us away from God. And yet he's saying, abstain from these sinful desires, which then will cause you to live such a good life that the people around you, though they accuse you of doing wrong, will actually glorify God the Father on the day that he visits. That we should abstain from these desires so that we can live such good lives that even when people accuse us of doing wrong, instead they glorify God the Father when he visits us. Peter very clearly has been talking about actions in this second chapter. He's been talking about the things that we do. At the very beginning of this chapter, he says, rid yourself of malice and deceit and hypocrisy and slander. And now he's saying, fight these sinful desires within you that wage war against you. And he says, live such good lives that the people around you see it. Even if they accuse you of doing wrong, they will glorify God. There very clearly is an action here. There's something that we must do. There's a life that we must live so that people around us will see God in the middle of what it is that we're doing. Oftentimes here in our culture, we kind of forget that. But see, there's two parts to glorifying God. The first one is, we talked about last week, we must declare the praises of the one who brought us out of darkness into light. So we must use our mouth, we must share what's going on, we must tell people our story with our lips, and then we must do what it is we're supposed to do with our lives. We must abstain from sinful desires and live such a good life that the people around us will go, wow, God is so good. As you tell your story, as you tell them about what has happened to you, as you tell them where you've been and where you've come from, and then they watch your life, they'll go, whoa. Which Peter's hearkening back to what Jesus said in Matthew. In fact, almost uses the exact same words when Jesus said this in Matthew 5:16. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. What I think is really cool here is that Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ, is writing to these new believers, having heard Jesus say those words. He was in that moment. He was there with him in Matthew. In fact, in Matthew 5, it says that Jesus brought his disciples around him and started teaching to them. Peter was one of those individuals sitting with Jesus when Jesus said, "You are the light." When he said to them, "Let that light then shine, so that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." Peter now, having been an individual that heard Jesus himself say that, is turning to the next generation going, live your lives in such a way that in the situation that you're in, that people will see your deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. What's interesting here is that Peter takes and adds a little bit to it. He takes Jesus' words and adds a little bit of a phrase that Jesus did not use. And Peter's phrase that he adds to it is this, that they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits us. Jesus said that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Peter says that they may see your good deeds, glorify God on the day he visits us. So what is Peter talking about? What's the variation that he's made there? Well, scholars have tried to figure that out for many years. What was he getting at? And they've landed on two things. The first one being salvation. Second one being judgment. But Peter was specifically talking to this audience in a world that didn't believe, going a little bit further than Jesus did, saying that there will be a day when God comes back and the people around you, as they see your life, will glorify God on the day that he visits us. Reason being they argued for salvation is that there would be a moment when people watch your lives, that when Christ returns, when God comes back, when he visits us, that they will be saved because they've watched your actions and they glorify God on that day. That through you, whether you realize it or not, people will be saved because of your actions when God comes back. Second argument for it then is the judgment. The idea of salvation is that they'd be saved. The idea of judgment is that when people look at your lives, they may not understand right now what it is that you're doing, but the day that God returns, as they stand before the judgment throne, when all is revealed to them, then they will sit there going, "Oh, now I get it," while they're being judged. I'd have to argue for the first one. I believe that it's the idea of salvation, because I believe it follows the pattern that Peter has within this book as he's talked about salvation multiple times. You will see again, he'll talk about it in a couple weeks when it comes to the idea of good deeds and salvation. There's a connection there, which is extremely powerful for you and me as we look at our lives, because the same thing holds true today. Have you ever thought about the fact that somebody on Judgment Day might be saved because they watched your life and went, "I get it"? How many people do you know in your circle that are watching you right now? Probably more than you understand. There are people that are observing each and every one of us every day going, what are they doing? Why are they living that way? Why are they so different? Peter says when people see our lives, they watch what we're doing, that on the day when God visits, they possibly could be saved. That they will glorify our Father in heaven. That we, through our actions, are bridge builders. His next step is then, so what does it look like to continue to be a bridge builder? Verse 13. Submit yourselves for the Lord's sake to every human authority, whether to the emperor as a supreme authority or to governors who are sent by him to punish those who do wrong and to commend those who do right. For it is God's will that by doing good, you should silence the ignorant talk of foolish people. So what did it look like to live this good life? If you're supposed to live a life that's so good that people glorify God, what's the first thing that Peter says? Submission. Submission. the first thing he says in regards to a good life is submit yourselves for the Lord's sake to every human authority, whether to the emperor as a supreme authority, to governors who are sent by him to punish those who do wrong and to commend those who do right. For it is God's will that by doing good, you should silence the ignorant talk of foolish people. I don't like that. I don't like that passage. I don't like that at all. In fact, I wish Peter had said that you're supposed to just tell them all the wrong things that they did so they will change their lives and live like you. What does it mean to live a good life? Just tell them all the bad things that they're doing. No, that's not what he says. In fact, he says as a bridge builder that we're supposed to live such good lives that we submit then to the governing authorities. Why should we submit to the governing authorities? Because they're sent to punish those who do wrong, to commend those who do right, and in doing so, we will silence the ignorant talk of foolish people through submission. Really, God? Submission? Couldn't it have been any other way? Well, see, as we talk about being aliens in this world, you know what's foreign to people? That. You know what's strange and weird? Submission. In fact, it's a word in our culture that just uttering it makes people go, oh, I don't really like that. I don't want to be submissive because submissive sounds weak. I'm not going to get anything done if I'm submissive. No one's going to listen to me if I'm submissive. And yet it's exactly the opposite. Jesus said that if we do this through Peter, that it will actually silence the ignorant talk of foolish people. Instead of arguing back and forth, it will be the thing that challenges people with their words as they see my actions, that they will be silent when I submit. Which you see, there's a trajectory within this passage. There's a growth trajectory within this passage. All the way through 1 Peter, he's been moving us from one point to another to grow in our spiritual walk, to crave things, to be built up, to get to a place where he says, you're a royal priesthood. And now he brings it full circle here and gives us an idea of what that looks like. What does it mean? As we've been growing, he's been building this argument that we are a royal priesthood. It began here. We were not a people, and now we are a people. Before we were nothing, and now we're something. And he continues to go on that not only were we not a people, we're now chosen. We're elect. God has given us mercy. We have an inheritance into that. We then are given love that we must love others with because we've been redeemed by Christ. We're born again. We are now special. We are chosen. We are a priesthood. We are God's elect, God's chosen, God's special nation. We are way up here. We have made it. Woo! Right? Maybe. Because then Peter flips it. And he goes, you have made it. You are a priesthood. So now, to live in such a way that God gets the glory, I'm asking you to do something a little alien. And that's this. Submit. Submit. Because just a second ago, Peter acknowledged that the individuals that he's writing to are being accused for wrongdoing when they've done nothing wrong. He said, live such good lives that when you're accused of doing wrong, they will see your actions and glorify God because of what you've done. And so he's acknowledging that they actually have every right to probably claim superiority because they were not wrong. They were right. They're being accused of doing something that they hadn't done. And then the next phrase is then, so you know how you live those good lives? Submit to the authorities that are wrong. Submit to the governors that you might disagree with because God has sent them to punish the people that are wrong, to commend the ones that are right, and it is his will then that by doing that you will silence the ignorant people in this world by doing this. Oh, that stinks. He flipped it. He flips the status and said, what? The first, the chosen, the elect, should be last. That those that are first should submit themselves. That living such good lives will get people to stop talking. Not when you shout back at them, But when you say nothing at all, he goes on. Live as free people, but do not use your freedom as a cover-up for evil. Live as God's slaves. See, not only were they supposed to submit, but they were free to do whatever they want. See, they actually had no connection or commitment to the governing authorities anymore. Why? Because they were free in this world. You and I are free. You and I are weird. You and I are aliens. We are from another country. We're actually illegal in the nation that we live in because we're not supposed to be here. This isn't the world that we're from. The governing bodies have no authority over us because who is our authority? God himself. Which says then, submit to God as slaves because you're free. Submit to God as a slave because you're free. Don't use your freedom to do evil things. Don't use your freedom as a cover-up to do the wrong thing. You can actually do whatever you want. You've been given freedom. There is nothing that confines you anymore. Through Jesus, your chains are broken. Everything is gone. There is freedom and eternity in him. And so we get to do whatever it is that we want. So Peter says, do this, submit. Submit to God as slaves, not to anybody else, but to God himself, because that's what we should do. Christian freedom is this then. It's not that we get to do what we like. It's not that we can do anything we want. Rather, Christian freedom is that we should do what we ought. It's not that I get to do anything that I like. It's not that I get to do what I want. It's I should do what I ought. So what should I ought to do? Be free as God's slaves while I submit. He continues. Show proper respect to everyone. Love the family of believers. Fear God. Honor the emperor. So what is it that we ought to do? Show proper respect to everyone, love the family of believers, fear God, honor the emperor. I don't know about you, but this passage this week just really hit me. Because I'd much rather read the freedom part and go, I want to do whatever it is that I like. I want to do whatever it is that I want. I have freedom. There's nothing that's binding me. There's nothing that's controlling me. There's nothing that I have to submit to other than God himself. And then God says, I want you to live this way. And so then Peter says, what is it that we ought to do? Show respect to everyone. Love the family of believers. Fear God. Honor the emperor. So when he says everyone, what does he mean? Show proper respect to everyone? Did he really mean everyone? Well, I found this week that said this. You are called to show respect to everyone, not just the people that deserve it, not just those that have earned it, not just the ones in our lives that are agreeable, not just the politicians that we vote for or the immigrants that are legal, not just the customers that pay the bills, the employees that work hard, the bosses that compliment us, the teachers that are fair, the classmates that share their lunch, the neighbors who are neighborly, or the kind pagans, nice Christians, or the helpful spouse or good parent. We are to show proper respect to everyone. Love the family of believers. Yet again, we're called to familial love as we love each other. Fear God. Once again, we must fear God. Reverent fear of a father that loves us, and then honor the emperor, which would have been completely foreign to the audience that Peter was writing to. Because this was radical in his day. And yet as you read it today, guess what? It's just as radical. It's just as radical. Because he's saying, respect all people, love the body of Christ, fear God, honor the emperor. You notice how he says fear God? We don't need to fear the emperor, we need to honor the emperor, but we must fear God. And what has God told us to do? Submit to the emperor as slaves to him so that the world will see him through us when they watch our actions. Which would have been radical because you know who the emperor was that Peter was telling them to submit to? The one that they were supposed to honor, it was this man named Nero. You know what Nero was about to do? He was about to kill all of them. He was about to come after every single one of them and make their lives miserable. And he'd already started, and there was already persecution that was happening, and they were already being blamed for all the things that were going on around them that were not positive. Nero burned Rome and blamed the Christians. And Peter's writing this probably before that happened, but the stage was being set for that to take place. And so preemptively, he says, you will honor the emperor. You will honor Nero. Why? He's a horrible human being. Why would I do that? Because you are free to live as God's slaves, to do what you ought. So as we think about that in our world today, it's respect all people, love the church, fear God, honor the president. Oh, I don't want to do any of those things. You know how hard it is in our world to respect everyone? You know how difficult it is as the body of Christ when we actually get to know each other, to love each other? You know what fear of God looks like in our culture? It's non-existent. And then let's talk about the president. Anyone want to go there? This is just as relevant today as it was almost 2,000 years ago when it was written. And yet Peter says, live such good lives that when they see you, they will glorify your Father in heaven on the day that he will return. So here's our challenge this week. And I want to take this serious. I want to really try hard at doing this. So here's what I don't want. I don't want us to find reasons not to. I think there's all sorts of reasons out there. In fact, as I read social media, as I read articles, as I read things on the internet, as I see the way people interact with each other, it's so much easier to find reasons not to do these things. I can tell you all the reasons why I shouldn't respect people, why I don't need to love individuals, why I don't need to honor the president. I can give you 100 reasons why I shouldn't do that. But what if, instead, we found ways that we can do it? Instead of finding the reasons not to, we can find the ways that we can. Because what Peter says is that will be the thing that changes lives. That as we find the ways that we can do these things, people will see our lives and they will glorify God in heaven. And so my hope is that we will live this way, because here's the reality of life. Here's what will happen. There will be sinful desires that wage war against your soul. People will accuse you of doing wrong when you didn't do anything. Foolish people will talk ignorantly about you. And we will want to do evil in the name of freedom. It's inevitable. But the only way that we can live this stuff out is when those things happen. And that's what really stinks about these verses, that in order to honor the president, love the believers, respect other people, we have to be given opportunities to do it. And so when those opportunities come, find ways that you can do it, not reasons you won't. Because if we do that, we will be alien. We will be weird. We will be strangers. And there is a very compelling reason why we should live this way. You want to know what it is? Come back next week and find out. Let's pray. Lord, we thank you for today. We thank you that you are a God that loves us, that speaks to us so profoundly in your word. And yet, Lord, if we really, truly look at it, it's scary. And Lord, you will give us opportunities to do the things you challenge us to, that we will have chances in our world to respect everyone when we don't want to love the family of believers when it's hard, to fear you when you don't seem present, God, and to honor the president when it seems difficult. And yet that's exactly how we grow. That's exactly how we become just like you. that we listen to your word, that we put it into practice in situations and times where it seems difficult. And so, Lord, I pray this morning for those situations. I pray that you will present those situations to each and every one of us, that we will have times this week to live such good lives that when people accuse us of being wrong, that they will see you. That when foolish people talk ignorantly against us, that we will not respond, that we will know that you have sent governors, that you have sent people to do what is right and convict the things that are wrong. That we will be free, not confined to any constraints in this world, but Lord, that we will live as your slaves, submitting to the authorities as you have asked. So that, Lord, our lives will speak volumes. And so I pray this morning that we will be aliens, that we will be different, that the world will stop looking at the heavens and they'll look at those around them and understand, wow, they're different. And that when people see us, Lord, and see our lives, they glorify you on the day that you return. We thank you for who you are. We give it to you in Jesus' name.